year today, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, announced the Domestic Debt Exchange Program, popularly known as the DDP. The exchange was a major contribution or condition to unlock the IMF $3 billion bailout package, which requires the restructuring of Ghana's debt at both domestic and external levels. The announcement at the time raised serious concerns amongst the experts, bondholders, and also other stakeholders. Well, here are bites, excerpts of the key issues that came up over the period.
In delivering the much-anticipated 2023 budget, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta confirmed the obvious. He officially unmasked the nature of Ghana's debt portfolio. According to him, Ghana was at a high risk of debt distress, and the debt levels were unsustainable. Unlike our 16th enrollment in 2015, Ghana's unsustainable debt position was certainly a huge obstacle in obtaining an IMF deal. This means a lot of conditions must be met. According to the fund, in cases where the country's debt is assessed as unsustainable, the IMF is precluded from providing financing unless the member takes steps to restore debt sustainability, including seeking a debt restructuring from its creditors. IMF's message was very simple: restructure your debt or no bailout package. Ghana was out of the Eurobond market, and IMF looked like the only option. No more foreign grants, and at this point, debt restructuring looked inevitable.
As a middle-income country, you will be we were being weaned of grants. You saw the slide?
Yeah.
Yes. And we'll be weaned of concessional financing. Actually, I was the minister who, would I say, honored or what, to receive the letter from the World Bank and the African Development Bank telling us that we had become a middle-income country. We couldn't borrow and repay over 40 years. We could only borrow and repay over 25 years.
After considering all the conditions and the precarious nature of Ghana's debt portfolio, Ken Ofori-Atta in the 2023 budget hinted government was planning to carry out a debt treatment to create enough fiscal space for a $3 billion extended credit facility bailout package from the Bretton Woods institution. Investors began to doubt the earlier assurances given by the president, and subsequent happenings heightened their fears.
No individual or institutional investor, including pension funds, in government treasury bills or instruments, will lose their money as a result of our ongoing IMF negotiations. There will be no haircuts.
Prior to this assurance, government had borrowed heavily from the domestic market, and the domestic component of the country's debt stock had reached an unsustainable level.
All the deposits and things that are there, unless government significantly increases interest rates, which would increase the cost of borrowing. Remember, compensation plus interest, and throw the budget into complete, they are not going to get the money from the domestic market. The non-residents who were buying our bonds exited a long time ago. It's in the 2020 budget. We are in the 2020-21 budget. It's a Bank of Ghana has said it. So the non-residents part of a word long ago, they were helping to deepen the domestic market. And we know it, right? It's on your websites and others. Government is not able to borrow from the domestic market all the money it needs. Either it offers higher or it cuts.
President Akufo-Addo's big assurance of no haircut brought enormous relief to the investor community. Little did they know that they were in for a big shock of their lives. Barely 5 days after the finance minister confirmed Ghana's decision to carry out a debt operation, an international credit rating agency, Moody's, dropped Ghana's long-term sovereign bonds rating to deeper junk territories, bringing the number of downgrades and revisions to at least 7 in 2022 alone. For Professor Bopin, the investors were skeptical about the president's assurances.
Stanley, the market knew the president wasn't speaking the truth. Right after the president made a statement, the reactions were more or less to reject the statement. Okay, and therefore, my expectation is that any investor who probably took a decision on the back of that wasn't an investor, was probably a lotto doctor.
Then came the biggest announcement in 2022, less than 2 months after the president had urged investors to ignore any information of a possible haircut. On 4th December 2022, the government fulfilled its sovereign component of the bargain. It finally announced a debt operation called Domestic Debt Exchange, which outlined the nature of debt restructuring for domestic creditors. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta revealed the program was to invite holders of domestic debt to voluntarily exchange approximately 137 billion cedis of the domestic notes and bonds of the Republic, including ESLA and Dutch bonds, for a package of new bonds to be issued by the Republic. At this point, investors intensified their search for answers. Was a promise of there will be no haircut just a way of calming nerves, or another clever way to swindle investors?
Why can't you be very specific and tell us that if you don't participate, you lose your money? Then some of us will commit suicide rather than go through the pain.
Oh, please don't contemplate that.
I'm 66 in March, my brother or my son. I'll be 66. And there are so many people. Maybe I can survive, but I know friends who work in the public service who are doing nothing presently. All the investment are out there, and you're telling them without interfacing with them on one-to-one or giving them information that take it or leave it.
Organized labor was the first group to taste government's pill of disappointment. Government had decided to include pension funds in the debt treatment. The group had to fight government for weeks to exempt them from the program. Other government assurances to investors couldn't stand the test of time, as government made a sharp U-turn on December 23, 2022, putting the hopes of individual bondholders into disarray. It had revised its decision to exclude individual bondholders in the debt exchange program. An amended clause contained in the legal document governing the program revealed that the type of investors that can participate in the invitation to exchange had been expanded to now include individual investors. This came as a big shock to these persons holding government securities in the form of bonds. Like most investors, they had relied on both President Akufo-Addo and Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta's assurance of an exemption. President Akufo-Addo had information at his beck and call. He has speechwriters and researchers who have the responsibility of helping him deliver accurate information. The president read from a prepared speech, so why would he get it so wrong?
And that's the reason where we are today. Joining us now is Isaac Kufeje, who's a data analyst here at Joy News. And in fact, when we go back to the issue of debt restructuring, it's just a matter of pain, desperation, weakness, you name it. That's been the sentiment I get each time I have a conversation with those who had a haircut. Well, you might not like me to say a haircut, but unfortunately, that's the reality.
Exactly. So haircut actually became, the infamous terminology probably around the whole DDEP. And just like you heard over there, the president assured investors that there will be no haircut. This was repeated by the finance ministers, that there will be no haircut. But we've seen U-turns and flip-flops. But thankfully, in the 2024 budget that was read just last month, the finance minister was very categorical that the DDEP had been concluded. And we've been tracking this since it started, December 4th, 5th, 2022. And we've seen the number of exchanges that government they've done. We've seen the first exchange, the second one, and even the third one that government called the DDEP reopening. We've seen groups that were not supposed to be part, but were invited to come for haircuts, if I should put it that way. We've seen how Bank of Ghana lost 60 billion, Ghana cedis as a result of this domestic debt exchange program. And you will be speaking to Dr. Richmond Etuahene, who has been putting together fantastic research around this DDEP, and you will see how government found ways and means to actually revise the DDEP impact on the banking sector, sort of an indirect way of recapitalizing the banks, probably putting all the pressure and all the burden on the Bank of Ghana, which lost about $6 billion.
And it's a good time now to bring in Dr. Richmond Tuahini, who is a banking consultant, joining the conversation. And thank you, Doc, for your time. The conversation around haircut, no haircut, I guess that's settled now, isn't it? Looking a year back as that conversation was unfolding at the time, the controversy surrounding it, but we're getting and coming to terms with possibly what had happened just a year ago. Where do you stand?
Thank you very much, Bliss. Thank you for the opportunity to explain what we have put together. When the president said there was no haircut, some of us who have done the various calculations said no, it wasn't right. So the exchange has been changed for so many times, about 3 to 4 times. But seriously, we've ended up 30% haircut on the whole sector. Depending
30%.
Averagely, banks are now 14% haircut. Bank of Ghana has about 53-point-something% haircut. Cocoa bills are 53%. Foreign bonds are about 52%. So when you aggregate them all, the pension fund has no haircut. They manage to, apart from the nominal losses, they manage to keep the same rate. So if you average the whole industry at the moment, the average is about 30%.
Okay, and Doc, sorry for cutting through, but to be fair to the president as well, maybe at the time he was making the comments, that was his intention. So it brings to the fore, could we have vetted this?
Well, once you go into the debt treatment, whichever way you take it, whether it's debt repositioning or debt reprofiling or debt exchange, you only end up by losing some money. So as the other speakers, other people have said, the people who advise the president, I don't know where they came from on debt exchange. Most countries, I can tell you, Argentina, Greek, Uruguay, Ukraine, and now an African country like Ghana, they've all experienced in Jamaica and Grenada, they've all experienced this when they went to IMF for debt treatment, especially the model that we picked. The model we picked, the debt exchange. And whatever way you go about it, you're going to have a serious haircut.
The implications for the economy is what's fresh on our minds now, knowing that that's just the aspect of the domestic debt exchange. There's a second phase, I guess, coming up, which will have to do with our external debt restructuring, which is already posing a challenge. But let's assess the first one, which has been the domestic debt exchange. Practically speaking, the impacts on the average Ghanaian.
Well, thank you, Blaise. I mean, it's had an impact on every sector of the economy. Individuals have lost funds. Banks have lost averagely 14%. Cocoa sector, as I've told you, it is only the pensions who put up resistance and they managed to get it through. So apart from these, the pension fund, all the industry has suffered. And don't forget, with the macroeconomic instability, higher inflation, depreciation of the currency, higher interest rate, accumulated with the debt exchange impact. Now it has affected ordinary Ghanaian on the street. Living standards has dropped. If you check the World Bank record, the recent data on poverty, 2.9 million of Ghanaians are now poorer as against 1.6 last year. So the debt exchange in real terms with higher inflation, depreciation and what have you has affected the ordinary Ghanaian. If you go to the banking sector, after they did the first exchange, they realized that the impact was so much on the banks and they started calling for capitalization. So they decided that they will review it and revisit it. So when the minister came from Marrakesh, he came with the new calculations. The new calculation is that he has reduced the maturity period from 13.8 years to 8.3 years. which brought the banks into where they are at the moment. But the Bank of Ghana suffered. Instead of the bank suffering, the losses have now been shifted.
Yeah.
NPV losses has been shifted to Bank of Ghana, because I think the Bank of Ghana has got a bigger muscle to take the shock. That's why they decided.
And a very much predictable situation, isn't it? But it's been a big stress for the banking sector. The governor himself admitting that there was a very tough moment for the sector, giving the trajectory from the banking sector cleanup to issues relating to the domestic debt exchange. How can the sector rebound? I guess that's the concern of the investors right now.
Well, the sector would take a reasonable time to come back, because you see, we have higher inflation, 35.3 or thereabout. I think it's the highest if you take Zimbabwe and one of the other countries. We are the third on the league. When you talk about the currency depreciation, with what is happening to the cocoa even syndication, there has been another point that Ghanaians have forgotten. Because we have a problem with the external debt restructuring, those who are supposed to participate in the cocoa syndication are now even charging higher premium. The reason why we haven't been able to syndicate the cocoa is all because the external creditors have not been properly structured. And this is the rollover. It is the rollover. The rollover crisis of the domestic has entered into the external forum.
I see.
That has affected cocoa syndication. We are looking only for $800 million, but we don't get international financiers to participate. And this is one area where people have forgotten that it is because of the debt restructuring, especially domestic. Because don't forget, there were domestic investors in our bonds, if you remember. They were about 14.6 billion. And they've all had to do juggling here and there. So they are now sitting cautiously.
And in fact, this is just bringing up the issue about the nexus. And that's why I want to bring in Isaac before I get back to you, Doc. The point about the next phase, which is the external debt restructuring. We are already facing challenges. And the controversy surrounding whether or not we missed a timeline, which government says is debatable, because some conditions ought to have been met before this timeline is finalized. Where are we now? How much commitment do we need, from the official creditors?
Well, first of all, it's factual that government has missed timelines, not just a timeline. The first timeline they set for themselves in the IMF program, they missed it. The second timeline they set for themselves to meet the executive board approval when they responded to our story, it was somewhere around 20-something November, they missed that timeline as well. So they've missed timelines. Not just one.
Putting that on
timelines,
record,
exactly. And it's clear that we are facing challenges, and that's clear for everybody.
And the IMF, in its official communication to us at the end of the first review, says how speedily we want the second tranche will be dependent on the official credit.
Exactly. We have what we call the required financial assurances. We, at this moment, are not required to probably sign the hard MOUs, but we need to get financial assurances that will help us unlock the tranches, of which we've not been able to get right now. Right now, what we are doing is to make sure that we use the bilateral way to get the required assurances we need. As for the commercial side, it's proven to be difficult because, blessed, you can't ask somebody who borrowed you money to all of a sudden accept 20 to 30% haircut.
Yeah,
to 40% haircut. That's huge, in fact. And they are looking at it because it's not just Ghana that's doing external debt restructuring at the commercial level. Zimbabwe is there. Other countries are there. So they are looking at the creditors, what they will do, the haircut they will give to Ghana. If you give Ghana a haircut of 40%, another country will come to you, you give Ghana this is my proposal. So they are very circumspect in terms of the magnitude of haircut that they can give to Ghana.
And that includes China.
China's
Absolutely. Concern they've been raising about the
exercise. Yeah, we've seen the gameplay they're having with Zambia, and we are not special anyway. So,
let's see how that works. But let's try and draw the nexus, Dr. Tiahini, the point about the domestic and the external. What's going to be the connecting point? If that fails, are we going back to a third round, perhaps, of domestic debt
That
exchange.
would be a disaster.
It's not something I pray for, actually.
No, we shouldn't even think about.
I see.
No, we shouldn't even think about, because then it means we are completely bankrupt. We should never ever think, whatever be the case, the external creditors, the negotiation must be completed, even to unlock the 600. The 600 is what we are all looking for. And it's also impinging on the cocoa syndication. Everybody is cautious. Nobody knows what is going to happen. So people are not ready even to participate in the cocoa syndication. And even they are going to participate, they are going to charge us a higher interest, which is the first time. So I don't even wish and pray that we'll get to the point that you are stating at the moment. Bless.
Anyway, we just hope for the best. Any final words, to managers of the economy, what we should be watchful about, and of course, what your recommendations are from this research you've carried out?
Yeah, please. What I find it quite incredible is people tell us that they were stress testing here and there. I would have thought if they have done a comprehensive and a detailed stress test, we would have found out what is happening to us at the moment. And again, the communication aspect of the debt restructuring was not very good at all, because it kept on changing the goalposts here and then. When they started in 5th December, I made a statement that one of the issues in debt restructuring, there must be transparency and objectivity. Unfortunately, the goalposts were being changed here and there. Tomorrow you hear these guys have been exempted. Tomorrow you hear this guy has been included. And all these things that are not as part of international debt restructuring, there must be transparency for effective communication. And also, our debt restructuring should be underpinned by strong microeconomic structures. What I mean by measures, there must be a serious expenditure cuts. That is the bane. Other than that, I bet you Jamaica did a similar thing. Within 3 years, they had to go back to the table. If the expenditure programs, if we don't stop some of this expenditure program, we'll go back in less than no time. Because we are getting to election year, I think another reason why the external are also keeping track is that as we get into the election years, people are becoming more worried because statistics have shown, records have shown that anytime we go into elections, we spend over, the last time was 15.2% of the GDP. The other one was 11.2. So people are very cautious that if they give in what they are saying, then we give room for expenditure blowouts. And I believe we must keep our expenditure, physical expenditure. We must curtail it,
right?
Reduce the size of government, reduce some of the flagship programs, review it without fear or favor. Other than that, the next government, whoever comes in, is not going to have it easy at all.
It's no doubt that these are very trying times for the country, but I'm grateful, Doc, for spending some time with us. Insightful conversation with you. And Isaac will be back with more data and analysis as we, of course, reflect a year on after the domestic,
we're actually doing part 3 of the A Nation That Begs, and that's heavily, it's on the external debt restructuring.
It's here on the Joy News channel, too, so you want to make a date with us as we bring you the latest. You're watching The Pulse on the Joy News channel. Still to come, citizens urge to take up the fight against illegal mining as stakeholders admit government has failed to deal with illegal mining. We'll tell you why.
We, the people, should take responsibility. And taking responsibility means holding our leaders accountable. We shouldn't just leave them. We have to be there front and center, advocating for changes, making sure that we are naming people and advocating.